Hello, and welcome to Lesson 7.5. Before we begin, please check your materials in front of you. You will need the fraction bar sheet printed and cut, Math Journal page 299, a pencil or a ruler, the fraction number line poster, and Math Journal page 230. Perfect. Now that you have all of your materials, let's begin lesson 7.5. Our goal today is to be able to represent fractions on a number line. Here's your math message. Try to think of a fraction between 0 and 1. Where do you think that number might be on the number line? Is it closer to 0, or is your fraction closer to 1? As a reminder, anything less than a whole is less than 1. You'll notice on the screen are fraction bars and fraction circle pieces. I've X'd out some things to make sure that we don't think that this is less than 1. The whole fraction bar and the whole fraction circle are both crossed out. One whole is not less than 1. It's equal to. Also, 2 halves, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, 6/6, 8/8, 10/10, 12/12 are all equivalent to 1 whole. So they're all crossed out as well, in addition to one of the fraction circle pieces in all of the fraction circles. You'll notice that all of the unit fractions, that's any fraction that is 1 over something, are all less than 1, as well as 1/2, 1/3. Use this information to help you come up with a fraction between 0 and 1 if you haven't done so already. Perfect. Let's try to figure out where some other fractions would go. Where do you think 1/2 would go? That's right. 1/2 would go exactly in the middle between 0 and 1. If we look at our fraction bars, 1/2 and 1/2, you need 2 halves to make a whole. The line in between is halfway through the whole, so the 1/2 fraction goes halfway between 0 and 1. Where do you think 1/4 would go? Point to the screen where you think 1/4 should go. That's right. 1/4 is closer to 0 and is smaller than 1/2. So it would go in between those two numbers. Let's practice some more. Where do you think 1/3 would go on the number line? Is it closer to 0 or closer to 1? Point to your screen with where you think 1/3 belongs on the number line. If you think it goes closer to 0, you would be correct. What about 3/4? Is 3/4 closer to 0 or closer to 1? That's right. 3/4 is closer to 1 and would go to closer to 1 on the number line. Let's review some vocabulary for today. First, we have distance. Think about fractions as a distance from 0 to an endpoint on the number line. You'll see the fraction bars 3/4 are shaded in, and on the number line, the triangle is marked at the 3/4 fraction. This triangle is 3/4 from 0. Our other word is whole. A whole is a distance from 0 to 1 on the number line. This time you'll see the fraction bar completely filled in as 4/4. 4/4 is the same thing or equivalent to 1 whole. In this case, the triangle has moved the entire whole the distance between 0 and 1. You'll notice the distance from 0 is boxed in red for both of these vocabulary words. This is a great way to explain your thinking. Now please take out your fraction bars and Math Journal page 299. You're going to use the fraction strips and place the halves strips on the halves number line. Please put your halves strips, end to end, starting at 0, onto your halves number line. At each part where the halves end, I'd like you to add a tick mark or a line using your pencil onto your number line. Let's place a triangle at 0. If you don't have a triangle at home, you can just use your finger to point. Right now, I am at 0 halves. If I move to the end of my half fraction bar, I am at 1 half. If I move to the end of my second fraction bar, I am at 2 halves. So 0 halves, 1 half, 2 halves. Let's try this with fourths. On the fourths number line, use your fourths fraction bars end to fill up your number line. After you have moved your fraction bars, please add the tick marks using your pencil where each of the fraction bars end. Let's practice counting using our finger, or if you have cut a triangle shape out, you can use that as well. 0 fourths, 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, 4 fourths. You can go ahead and do that again if you need to. Now I want you to write the fraction at each tick mark that we said as we were counting. Go ahead and pause the video to give yourself time. This is what your Math Journal page should look like when you are done. 0 halves, 1 half, 2 halves. 0 fourths, 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, and 4 fourths. Now I'd like you to try the eighths, thirds, and sixths number lines. Continue the same way using your fraction bar pieces to create tick marks across the number line. Practice counting with your triangle or your finger, and then label the fractions across each of the number lines. Again, please pause this video so that you can complete this activity before we move on to the next thing. Well done. Now we are going to use the fraction poster. This poster is a little bit different than the number line you were just working on. You'll notice that the whole fraction on the top goes to 2, whereas the other number line you were working on only went to 1 whole. Think of this as 1 full red circle or 1 full red fraction bar, and this poster as 2 full red circles or 2 full red fraction bars. What we're going to do is I'm going to use this red line to mark where 1 whole is on all of my number lines. I'd like you to use your pencil to line up the edge with all of the 1 wholes. If you have a ruler, this is also a great time to use the flat edge of the ruler to line all of them up. From here I can see that 1 is equivalent to 1 over 1, 2 over 2, 3 thirds, 4 fourths, 6 sixths, and 8 eighths. That's because they're all the same distance from 0, or they all fill 1 whole fraction bar or 1 whole fraction circle. Let's try to find equivalent fractions for 1 half. This is the halves number line, so I'm going to use my straight edge to the 1/2 fraction. If I go to my thirds number line, I see 1/3 and 2/3. But there's nothing that lines up here. That must mean that no thirds are equivalent to a half. Let's go down to our fourths number line. 0/4, 1/4, 2/4. See how the 2/4 fraction is in line with my straight edge and the 1/2 fraction? That tells me that 2/4 are equivalent to 1/2 because both fractions are the same distance away from 0. Can you find another fraction on the 6th or 8th number line that is equivalent to 1/2? Point to it. Nice job. Do you see how they're all in line with each other? Using your straight edge, I want you to try to find equivalent fractions for 1/3, 1/4, 2/3, and 3/4. Pause your video to give yourself some time to do that now. If you haven't paused, make sure you do so. Okay. How do you know that 2/8 is equivalent to 1/4? That's right, they're the same distance. We have to move the same amount away from 0. Now I'd like you to try to find equivalent fractions using Math Journal page 230. You're going to find equivalent fractions for 2/3 and 3/4. You can use either of the number lines that we were just using and your straight edge to line up and find equivalent fractions. Please remember that you can also draw fraction circles or fraction bars. To close today, you're going to complete an exit slip. The exit slip link will be provided to you, but here's a look at what the questions are so you can prepare your brain now. If you feel like you still need extra practice with fractions on number lines, please try the extra practice activity, Finding the Hidden Fraction. You can do this activity with a sibling or a parent at home. But don't worry if you're not 100% confident yet. We will continue to practice using fractions on number lines all throughout the week. Good luck, and please reach out to your teacher if you have any questions.